Shalom Aleichem Rabbatai. We're continuing in the second parak of Eiruvin at Mishnah Gimel. We're talking about this enclosure, these posts, these slats that are put around a well to allow access, to allow you to get water out to water your animals on the way to Yerushalayim to be Ole Regel. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad Beit Setayim. He says you can make it as big as you need to accommodate the needs of the traffic there, but only up to a Beit Setayim. Now, I've seen in Zerayim, this is actually a measurement of seeds. You plant 2 seah worth of seeds in this area. And each seah fits in a 50 by 50 amma square, so there's actually 50 by 100 amot. So that's the maximum size. Amru lo, they said to Rabbi Yehuda, lo amru beit setayim, ela legina lekarpeh. We only said this limit of 2 seah enclosures for a gina, a garden, or a karpeh. A karpeh is sort of like an area that we enclose it for storage or for non-residential purposes. Avolim haya diro socher. But if it was a fold where you put your cattle in to fertilize the area, or a socher, a corral animals, muksa is like the backyard. Like muksa is also stuff you don't touch on Shabbos, so the stuff you don't want to touch anymore, but you don't want to throw it out either, you throw that in the backyard where no one sees. That's probably, why people do that. Chatzar, or the chatzar is the front yard. We've seen as usually a shared space between multiple residences. Afilu beit chameshet kurin, even 5 kor, which is way more than setayim. Afilu beit asora kurin mutter, even 10 kor would be mutter. Mutter lacharki kolshahu, and you can put these slats, the corner slats we mentioned Mishnah Aleph, and the side slats to fill in the gaps at any distance. As long as you're adding slats, again, as we mentioned in the end of Mishnah Bet, is if you want to make the area bigger around the well, the enclosure larger, you have to add more side slats in between the corners. Great, Mishnah Dalet. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im hayta derech rabim mafsokton. If there was a public street, public traffic is passing through this area, you have to redirect and divert the road around the enclosure. They say no, you could have the road go through the gap in the enclosure. Now the Mishnah explains what kinds of water sources we can rely on this enactment. Again, this is a kula to allow this kind of partition around the well, even though the gaps are quite large. The gaps are bigger than the corner posts and the side posts we saw in Mishnah Aleph, but they allowed this for the needs of Ole Regel, as we're going to see. So echad bor rabim, whether it's a cistern for the rabim, for the public, echad bor yachid, a ber rabim, or a well for the rabim. A well has like a spring underneath, and you get the bucket. A cistern, like they put water into it, and then you draw the water out when you need it, but it's not necessarily connected to a spring. Ber yachid, or it's a well that's privately owned, but he's letting people use it. Osin l'chem pasim, you can make this enclosure around it to allow access on Shabbos. Avol bor yachid, but a cistern belonging to an individual, you can't rely on this kula. You have to make a real fence around it, 10 tefachim tall. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. This is according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava says, "Ein osin pasin el leber harabim bilvad." He says the only water source we can rely on this flimsy, highly opened kind of partition to enclose it is a well that is for the public, not a cistern at all, and not the well of an individual. Lashar, and for the other kinds of water sources, osin chagura gevua asar tefachim. You have to make literally a belt 10 tefachim tall. Now this might mean he requires an actual fence, a real mechitza, 10 tefachim tall, like Rabbi Akiva said for the private cistern, or it could be something we referred to at the end of the first parak, that sometimes they would make these like cords or ropes, like three ropes or belts, with using lavud, so the gaps aren't greater than 3 tefachim, and you get a mechitza 10 tefachim tall. And as I mentioned, you see this sometimes as sort of the backup wall of a sukkah. Shkoyach, be well.